Hey guys, in this week's Casually Criterion episode, we're going to talk Apur Sansar, the third film in the Apu Trilogy. But before that, we're going to talk about The Cameraman, Justin's Haul from the Criterion Sale, and Inception, 10 years later. So, join us!
Hello and welcome to the Casual Cinecast, powered by Cinelinx. My name is Chris, and with me is a man who completes the podcast trilogy from Casual Cinecast, Mike. How are you doing today?
Good. I'm glad I could be that staple that brings the whole trilogy together.
Yeah, you wrap everything up in a tight little bow.
I'm like the rug in The Big Lebowski.
Exactly.
You really tied this podcast together.
Yeah, exactly.
Also with us is a man who last we talked to him was not married, is married now. Justin, congratulations from the bottom of my heart. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing excellent. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Congratulations from me too, by the way.
Oh, okay. Yeah, then I appreciate that too. You didn't say anything.
We don't talk except we're on the podcast, so I haven't actually talked to you about the wedding at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's true.
And neither have I. So why don't we catch up a little bit here at the top of the show and tell us a little bit about the wedding and how it was, maybe some of the hardships that you had to go through during the pandemic trying to get the wedding taken care of. I'm all interested in all of it very much.
Sure, yeah. So I'll try to be brief. The initial wedding date was May 2nd of 2020, and pretty quickly into the Corona stuff, we realized we weren't going to be able to do that. So we rescheduled for July 11th, thinking this thing should be over by July. And that turns out to not be the case.
Sweet summer child.
And so over the last couple weeks, we were kind of hoping that there would be some sort of government shutdown thing that basically said that we couldn't have the wedding, because we were talking to our venue, because we were basically got super uncomfortable with the idea of having the wedding regardless of any government mandate saying we could or couldn't have it, right? Like we just basically were started to not feel good about having, 80 of our closest family and friends all gather in a place right now. And so we were hoping for a mandate to like force it to shut down, because we were basically talking to our venue and they basically gave us no option without a government mandate of rescheduling the wedding or, canceling and getting any of our money back. So it was a real headache for like 2 weeks there of like, can we postpone the wedding so we can party with our friends? And basically it came down to like, no, you have to have the wedding and endanger all of your friends or lose all of your money. And so we opted to lose all of our money and did a super small wedding with immediate family only in my now wife's parents' backyard. And it was amazing. It was like perfect. And it's really hard to imagine doing this big elaborate thing now that we did it so small, and it kind of felt so perfect and was such a fantastic day.
That's awesome, man. I've never, like me being a dude who does not value weddings, right? I've never understood like the big wedding or the appeal of a big wedding. I've always thought to myself that like, if the time comes where I ever do get married, I would definitely want to do something small and more intimate. So it's just less hassle, less headache. Cause I wouldn't want my wedding day to be like a stressful experience, or I'm sure that's inevitable, but like I would want it to be the least stressful experience possible.
Yeah, and I think it's funny because I do work in the wedding industry. I shoot wedding videos. I felt the same way as you, but shooting a lot of weddings, it seemed like a lot of fun to like hang out with all of your friends and your family and have like a band play and there to be dancing and like food and celebration and stuff. So it kind of got under my skin, being at all of the big weddings that I shoot. So sure. I think that's part of it. And what is also funny is that once we went to the small ceremony, we no longer had like the venue doing all of the planning and everything. So then we had to coordinate everybody. It got a little more stressful thinking about all the things we had to do the small wedding. And plus by the time we decided, no, we're going to cancel this anyways and just do the small one, we only had like, I think 6 days to throw everything together.
Oh my.
Wow.
So it was more stressful in a way, but definitely good. And the other silver lining is, we lost all of our money with the venue, but I did get on the phone with them and convince them that hey, since we paid for all of this food and paid for your time on Saturday, can you guys just take all of the food that we paid for? And I've found a homeless shelter nearby in San Antonio, Texas. Like, can you just take all of that food on Saturday that you were going to serve to us and like donate it to this homeless shelter? So
Nice.
They got like 80 people's worth of food.
Yeah.
Like
I
buffet
saw that on
food.
I saw it on Facebook and was really impressed that you came up with that and did it. I tell all my friends about it now just to show them how cool of a friend I have, like, because I think it's really awesome that you did that.
Oh yeah. It's like the silver lining of like, yeah, we lost a lot of money from the venue, but a lot of people got fed now. So
Yeah.
I can like rest a lot easier with that money just being gone. Right.
That money was spent either way, right? And it was either going to go to waste or you could give it to somebody. And that's essentially what you did. And I find that really, really awesome. Good job.
Thank you. Yeah, it feels good. But yeah, happily married. We did like a honeymoon in Austin for a few days where we just kind of like pigged out after all of the dieting for the wedding so we can fit into our dress and suit respectively. So we just like pigged out in Austin and just kind of chilled. Not that, we can't go do a lot. We can't do a big honeymoon, but we did something like super small and it was awesome.
That's awesome. Once this pandemic is over, you guys will have to like go on a cruise or something really awesome.
Yeah, we had a week in Sandals, Jamaica booked. And that had to be moved, kind of indefinitely into the future. Right now it's scheduled for November, but who knows by November if we can even do it then.
Yeah.
But at
maybe
some point,
November 2022.
Yeah, there you go. It's all booked. It's all paid for. So we just have to like go once we do it. So we do have the big thing planned.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So we're right there with you.
Well, once the pandemic stuff has settled down a bit, I do want to take on the podcast, going on record, like you and Nicole out. We should go get some food and celebrate on a small scale. I really want to, do something for you guys.
McDonald's, here you guys
Yeah.
come.
Yeah.
I mean, that's my budget.
We love McDonald's.
Yeah. Start thinking about what you want for McDonald's.
Yeah, actually talked about Burger King in our vows and how much we love Burger King. So maybe that'll
Nice.
be better. A little more.
What's the Arrested
brand.
Development joke? It really is a fantastic restaurant.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks for checking in and thanks for the congratulations. I totally appreciate it.
Yeah. Again, congratulations from me as well. And I'm sure all the listeners, I will congratulate you on their behalf as well.
Yeah.
All right. So if this is your first time listening to the show, this is a Casually Criterion episode, which is a Criterion Collection focused episode that we like to do every other week, where we review a film from the Criterion Collection that is voted on by the listeners. Before we get into the main review, we'll be doing the usual news on the march, where we talk about recent news and things that we have been watching. So if you haven't seen the movie, you can still listen. Then we'll move into our Casually Criterion review. This week it is for Apur Sansar, spine number 785, which is the third film in the Apu Trilogy.
That's right. And we chose the Apu Trilogy through our polls that we put up for our Criterion episodes. At the end of this episode, we're going to each pick a film based on a theme, and then we'll put those three films up on a poll on Twitter for you, the listener, to go vote and pick our next Criterion film that we review. And if you want to follow us on Twitter, we are at Casual Cinecast. We're also at the same handle on Facebook and Instagram. The poll will only be on Twitter, but we do post a link to it on Facebook. And also, if you want to talk to us about anything, send us any questions, any feedback on the show, you can send messages to any of those accounts. You can also email us at casualcinemedia@gmail.com. And then, of course, if you haven't done so already and you like the show, you want to help other people find it, go onto iTunes or whatever podcast platform you use. And if you're able to, give us a 5-star review. It will help other people find the show, and we would appreciate that.
Yes, please. And thank you. And I don't have anything else. So are we ready to go ahead and move into news on the march?
Absolutely.
Yes.
All right, let's do it, guys.
News on the march!
All right, Justin, so you were not here last week, as we just got done talking about. So why don't you kick us off on news on the march and kind of let us know what you've been up to?
Cool, yeah. So, like you said, I wasn't here last week because of the wedding and honeymoon and being busy with that. And you guys did a review, which I haven't listened to yet, of Palm Springs, because I was just now recently able to watch the movie.
You should have watched it as the credits began. You should have fired up our episode.
Yeah.
like at the same time listen to the review and watch the movie?
No, when
as
the credits of the movie.
The final credits, not the opening credits.
Oh, the end credits. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I know. Whoops. I'm listening to you on Cinemas talking about the Red Shoes, actually.
Wow.
So it's next in line after that.
Okay,
but
good.
anyways, I just wanted to say that I did really like that movie. I thought it was a super fun rom-com, and I look forward to hearing last week's episode on that.
How's that episode on the Red Shoes, by the way, of Cinemusts?
It's good so far. I'm like 2/3 of the way through it, and I'm really enjoying the conversation. So
Yeah, it was good. It was a good episode.
yeah,
I listened to it.
Cinemusts.
I enjoyed it. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Go check that out. Go check out their other episodes. Great podcast.
Yeah.
And moving on from Palm Springs in last week's episode to new news.
Well, hang on. Sidebar. What'd you think of Palm Springs, buddy?
Oh, I thought it was really good. It was a super fun rom-com, a super fun twist on the whole time loop sort of movie, the Groundhog's Day thing. We've seen before with Groundhog's Day and other films that have kind of imitated it. I think they did a really good job of playing with that format and having fun with it and making it feel fresh and not just like another Groundhog's Day-esque sort of movie.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Good. I'm glad you liked it. I thought you would, but
Yeah.
it's hard to tell. I know you and I don't have the best track record with Andy Samberg.
No. No. Hot Rod is one of the few movies I have walked out of in theaters.
I actually went back to that over this last week after just to see how it was. After I watched Palm Springs, I didn't get very far into it. No, I didn't go back. It was not a pleasant experience.
Yeah, I think with Palm Springs, there are some things that don't land perfectly, like comedically for me, and that's kind of what keeps me from loving the film. But I really enjoyed it. Like I just like a good rom-com, and there was enough funny stuff, and I laughed enough to, overall I had a really good time with it.
Well, it's a wonderful script.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I think it's super
agree
fun. I like. I don't want to spoil it because we're kind of in general talking here, but the other actor who's not Andy Samberg or the main girl, whose name I can't escape me, the other person who was involved in all of this, I really enjoyed everything with him a lot. I thought he was really good.
Does his name really escape you, or are you just trying to be spoiler free?
I'm just trying to be spoiler free and not say his name.
Oh, okay.
Her name escapes me, the lead actress.
Yeah, it's the first time I've ever seen her, but I think she's wonderful. She's really funny.
Yeah, she's really good.
She was an episode of Black Mirror that was really good, the Star Trek episode.
I've only watched one episode of Black Mirror and was like, yep, that's enough.
Yeah, I watched the pig episode and I was like, I don't want to watch this anymore.
Yeah, that's the one I watched too. Okay, but moving on from Palm Springs, I think.
Yeah.
My birthday was 2 days before the wedding, and so as a birthday gift, my then fiance, now wife, bought me the Criterion edition of Buster Keaton's The Cameraman, which I watched over this weekend, and I really like Buster Keaton. Are you guys Buster Keaton fans?
Mm-hmm.
Of course. This is true.
I do, but I have to ask, as a surrogate for the listener. But anyways, yeah, I watched this. This is one of the films that Buster Keaton did once he signed over to MGM, and it's basically considered his last great movie before everything hit the fan with his career, and it basically tanked because of MGM and his relationship with them. So what I will say about this movie is that it is funny, and if you like Buster Keaton, you will probably like this movie. It's not his best movie. It's probably the least good Buster Keaton movie that I've seen. There's some kind of funny moments, but nothing that like really had me laughing out loud or rolling like some of his other films like The General or Sherlock Jr. have.
I think The General is probably one of my favorite silent movies.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think it's probably mine. It's my favorite silent comedy. I think it's just hilarious, like pretty much from start to finish.
Yeah. I think The General is about as close to a perfect silent film that like anyone who's never seen a silent film and you're like, I want to get into silent films, perfect place to start, The General.
Yep. I've shown it to my dad, who has no interest in silent film, and I showed it to my wife's, I guess my brother-in-law now. I showed it to him one time when he was staying over and he was wanting to watch a comedy film. I talked him into watching a silent film and showed him The General, and he just cracked up and really loved it and was like pleasantly surprised. So you're right. But for The Cameraman, it's interesting to watch because it's considered his last great film, but it's also not as good as his other films. So it's kind of this weird middle ground between not being great, but you can still see how talented Buster Keaton is. So I find it really interesting to watch from that perspective.
Yeah.
And it's not like you can see the bad coming. You can just feel something about it isn't quite working, isn't quite like firing. And I find that super interesting. And on the special features of this disc, which is one of the most enjoyable things, there's a little documentary with these two guys walking around LA pointing out all the spots in LA that like Buster Keaton and Harold Lloyd and Chaplin would film their movies. Mm-hmm. And they would be at these spots and point like, oh, this is where the fire truck comes around the corner and Buster Keaton jumps on the fire truck in the Cameraman. Right. And they talk about how you can, see exactly what LA was like because they would go out on the streets and shoot these stunts as opposed to build 100% studio sets for their films. So that's a super interesting documentary about these silent films as like a time capsule to look back in time. And there's also one with a friend of Buster Keaton who talks about his MGM years and how everything tanked on his career. That's super interesting on this Cameraman disc that is also worth watching too. Like, so it's kind of one of those that has like the special features are just as interesting as the film. So I recommend this disc overall. Maybe the disc as a whole, like more than the movie itself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, totally. That makes a lot of sense. I actually feel that way with a few Criterion films.
I mean, that's kind of Criterion at its root. Like you buy it, a lot of them, not all of them have great special features, but a lot of them elevates the movie and makes it better. The special features do.
Well, cool. So that's the Cameraman. And the other thing I wanted to talk about real quick was just go over some of the Criterion Sale haul that I got, because Criterion's 50% off at Barnes & Noble sale is going on, which is the time that all of us Criterion lovers get to kind of freak out and buy a bunch of movies, more than we can afford, most likely.
Yeah, I saw the picture of your haul on Facebook, and it was most impressive.
Yeah, so I'll go over
jealous,
that. Yeah, I'll go over that for the people who don't have Facebook or Twitter. I didn't see it. This was on the honeymoon. I got like $100 gift card for my birthday, and I was like, I need to spend this on something, and I'm just gonna spend it on something lavish. So I ran over to Barnes and Noble thinking like, I'm gonna pick up all of these cool movies that have come out recently for the sale. And much like you'll see online if you follow any Criterion groups or the Criterion subreddit, all of the stores are kind of wiped out of Criterion films and like box sets, like all the good stuff. So I still wanted the joy of like going through the store and picking out movies and buying them rather than just going to an online order.
Yeah.
So I picked up what they had available that I was really interested in, which is still a good haul. But what I got in store was The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp and Brief Encounter, which we recently covered on the show, and I really loved those films. Yeah. I also got In the Heat of the Night, My Winnipeg, The Virgin Spring, and All About My Mother.
Nice.
Which was
all good.
Which are all cool. Yeah. I've kind of moved away from blind buying. Normally I would blind buy a couple of movies, but I ended up putting all of those choices back and sticking with things I had seen before.
Yeah, it's good to do that sometimes, because once you blind buy too much, then all of a sudden you'll have movies that sit on your shelf for years that you never watch.
Yeah, I have those, and I don't need them any more of them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but today I did do an online order, which I haven't received yet, of like the big things that I really wanted to pick up that the stores were out of. So I ordered Roma, Portrait of a Lady on Fire, Marriage Story, and The Great Escape. So
nice.
I'm very excited about getting those in the mail and like going through the
those
special features.
Are all great. Yeah, good job.
Yeah, thank you. But if you are listening and you want to let us know what you got on the Criterion Sale, I would love to see everybody's collections. I think this is a super fun time of year where you just get to see people post and be happy about all their Criterion purchases.
Yeah, I really want the Great Escape disc, real bad.
Yeah, I am excited to dig into that like packaging and the little booklet and read all the stuff about that, because that is a movie that I absolutely love.
Oh, I know. That's actually one of the movies that started me on my journey to like getting into older films.
Yeah.
Like I remember I was just chilling one day, and then I'd already been into movies, but getting into older films. I remember The Great Escape was on, and my dad was going to bed, but he was like, oh, this is a really good movie. So I was like, oh, is it now? So I just sat there and just kind of watched it.
Yeah.
And fell in love with old movies and started kind of my journey with Steve McQueen movies, I think, is where I kind of began everything.
Yeah, and you showed Great Escape to me kind of in that same vein of like, I was looking for some older movies to get into, and you're like, check this out. This got me into older movies.
Yeah.
And so that worked.
It's just too good. Like, I think The Great Escape is almost perfect. Almost. It's so good. I haven't seen it in years, but I still think about it frequently. I whistle the theme to myself sometimes when I'm doing like work, you know? Mm-hmm. So anyway, Great Escape. I love that movie. Steve McQueen is so cool. James Garner is so cool. Charles Bronson is always cool.
Richard Attenborough, is he in that too? Am I?
Yes.
John Hammond from Jurassic Park. People who haven't gone that far back in film history might recognize that. Yeah. Yeah. And for also people who may not know, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, there is a cameo of Great Escape where they insert Leonardo DiCaprio over the Steve McQueen character into the footage from The Great Escape. So
God, I want Tarantino to like just put out a new version of The Great Escape, but they just have Leonardo DiCaprio take over Steve McQueen's scenes every time.
Yep. But playing his character at the same time.
The Rick Dalton version of Steve McQueen's character would be wonderful. Like everything else is the exact same. Just every scene with Steve McQueen is just different.
Yeah, maybe that's a special feature in an upcoming like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood issue. Or maybe it's on the Criterion of Great Escape. I don't know. I haven't got it yet.
You'll see when you get the disc, you know?
I'll let you know. I could look it up on the site, but who does that?
Why spoil the surprise?
Yeah.
Better to get your hopes up about this thing we just made up.
True. Okay, well that's it for me for News on the March for this week, and so I will toss it over to Mike. What have you been watching?
Cool. So nothing new. A lot of TV shows. Recently finished The Sopranos again. It was wonderful. But the only thing I really want to talk about is so this week I watched Inception, which is this year is the 10-year anniversary of Inception. So I kind of wanted to see what does this movie look like 10 years later. I watched it quite a bit when it was new, but then I didn't really watch it for probably about 8 years. I haven't seen it in quite a while. And guys, this movie holds up. This movie does not get dated by technology or by costumes or by like the world around it. So much, or so many sci-fi movies, you can kind of like watch them and you can kind of see when they were filmed because everything seems very dated. Inception feels like it could have been made today. You know, I mean, everyone's dressed in a suit, which kind of looks timeless, you know, and dresses, and like we'd never see the real world or what's going on in the real world, you know. It's all really cool, and I think this is probably the only movie that Tom Hardy has ever kind of embraced being handsome.
Yeah.
I mean, now that I think about it, I don't know if I've ever seen a Tom Hardy movie where he's not like doing a weird voice or like weird makeup or weird hair or something, you know?
Yeah. This one, he's just in nice clothes and kind of charming.
And he's the most charming guy in the movie. Like, you never see Tom Hardy do that. So it's interesting just being like, oh yeah, Tom Hardy's a good looking guy. It's easy to forget.
This movie shows that he could be, if he chose to, he could be a leading man. You know, like he could be Leonardo DiCaprio if you wanted.
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly. Yeah, he could have been like a Hollywood like A-lister. Mm-hmm. I mean, not that he's not, but I feel like he could have a lot more options than like he allows himself to have. But anyways, Inception, the special effects still look amazing. It still feels fresh. Like, you know how like whenever there's like a big movie like The Matrix or something that like comes out and changes everything, and then after that you get a whole bunch of imitations.
Right. Yeah.
I feel like I'm not tired of Inception and like the special effects of Inception. Right. I feel like no movie was ever able to capitalize on what Inception did in the same way that Inception did it. And I feel like this was maybe the last really like inventive, creative blockbuster that I remember kind of like everyone unanimously just kind of loving. Like, has there been another blockbuster since then that has felt so revolutionary and new and fresh?
Yeah, not one that's not part of, like a already set up IP, right?
Right. Like Endgame doesn't count because that's like just the MCU machine.
Yeah, I was going to say, Mad Max.
Yeah, it feels like Fury Road has been the only other movie since Inception that I think has united audiences all over with just like being, I don't want to say like in awe of the movie, right? But it's like everyone goes in and everyone seems to understand the appeal of this particular movie. Like, what is this movie doing? What is it doing that's new? And everyone just seems to kind of unanimously get it. There seems to be like an energy in the air with Inception that I remember very distinctly when it was in theaters. That I think Fury Road, you're right, is like the only other movie since then, I think, that has kind of given me that kind of vibe where when you watch it, you just kind of understand that everyone in the theater is enjoying this.
Maybe I didn't feel it at the time when I watched it for the first time, but Spider-Verse, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse might be able to that same, like, everybody just seems to love it.
Yeah, it's connected to an IP though, but yeah,
it is connected to an IP. But like, you know, they kind of did some sort of revolutionary animation work, right? That really kind of set the film apart as well. But yeah, it's not an original property.
And I'm not even talking like loving the movie, right? Like you can watch Inception or Fury Road and not love them. But like I think when you watch them, you kind of have like an undeniable, even if you're not crazy about it, you have like an undeniable understanding that like this is the right movie for this place and time. And I feel like Inception is that movie. Like it's creative. I think the score was probably the most like replicated thing of Inception.
Yeah. It kind of dominated movie trailers for about a decade. It might still be doing it.
But I think this is Chris Nolan's best movie. I don't think it's going to be possible for him to top it. Sorry, Tenet. But I don't think that matters. It's like this is his Pulp Fiction, you know? This is his Citizen Kane. Like he put out a movie that is so unique and original that he'll never top it, but it doesn't matter because he made it and he cemented himself as like someone to pay attention to.
So how do we feel about like theories about Tenet? If I give you guys one, is it a spoiler but it's a theory I have nothing to base it on really?
I don't care. As long as it's a theory.
Yeah, it's a theory. Nobody knows. But there are theories out there that Tenet is connected to Inception in some way or another.
Well, do you mean in the way that like the movie Soldier with Kurt Russell is connected to Blade Runner?
I've never seen Soldier, but I guess no. There would be like some tangential, like they take place in the same world. Not
well,
like
that's what I'm talking about. Like the movie Soldier with Kurt Russell is like not a very good movie, but the writer of Soldier actually like I think had something to do with the original Blade Runner, and he puts some of the same ships and some of the same lore into Soldier that actually existed in Blade Runner. So technically, they're in the same universe. Even though there's no replicants in Soldier.
A little bit closer than that. But yeah, that's the theory. It's the thing I'm looking forward to seeing. If
really what you're talking about is more like a, like I remember a long time ago, Quentin Tarantino wanted to make a movie called The Vega Brothers about the characters from Pulp Fiction and Reservoir Dogs being connected and being brothers. So more like that. Like a filmmaker's universe type thing. Like a
Kevin Smith sort of Buick universe.
Yeah.
Or I'd call it like a sneakquel because you don't know it's a sneakquel.
Yeah. That's fun. Oh. I like a sequel like that, right?
So like a Split situation.
Yeah, Split. Yeah, type of situation. Who knows? I do know that like they were pulling Inception from the theater. Like you couldn't show it in theaters at the beginning of the year. That's actually the last I saw it in the theater. But so some of the theories were that the reason they were pulling it from the theaters and weren't letting like repertory theaters play it is because it was going to connect to Tenet somehow. So who knows though?
Yeah.
Interesting.
I watched Inception about a year ago, maybe a little bit more, but I completely agree with you that it holds up. My favorite thing that I'll add on about Inception is that I think if you really start dissecting some of the things that happen and think about it afterwards, there's a lot of things that can get kind of muddy and confusing and maybe don't necessarily make perfect sense. But to the movie's credit and to Christopher Nolan's credit, when you're watching the movie, everything makes sense and you're kind of watching it and you're having such a good time and enjoying the movie that it doesn't really matter. Like, and it all kind of works in the moment.
Well, so yeah. Okay. From here on out, spoilers for Inception. It's a 10-year-old movie, so I don't really feel bad. So skip ahead in the show notes. It will all be timestamped. So, okay. I'm convinced that this movie is even filmed like a dream.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's very much intentional. The things that don't make sense, things that don't add up. I don't know specifically what you're talking about, but like, I mean, we're always globetrotting all over the place in this movie. We're always just kind of arriving at places. I feel like a lot of scenes could be interpreted very much in like a Sixth Sense kind of way, like he was a ghost all along, like he was dreaming all along situation. Yeah. So many hand-wavy things in this movie that work in the moment, but when you think about them, they don't work. For example, like Ken Watanabe, like the idea that he can just make a phone call while on a plane and it goes through all the proper channels in the American government before they land to let Leonardo DiCaprio walk off this plane. That in and of itself is too hand-wavy to believe.
That just explains the corruption in the American government.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. Yeah. But all I'm saying is like there's a couple places in this movie, like there's one very specific place actually, where like it happens, and I'm convinced that Leonardo DiCaprio never wakes up after that. The whole last third or half of this movie is like a dream. Not that there is a right answer, but yeah. I think it's edited and shot and filmed in such a way to where you're always popping up in the middle of scenes or conversations, and characters just kind of wander in and out, and they never have any small talk. It all feels like one of the dreams, like everything, even the overall arc of the movie and the tone of it. And I think it's quite genius when you look at it that way.
Yeah, there's definitely those things. I think what I was referring to is that it's so complicated and kind of convoluted that when you start thinking about it later, sometimes you're like, does this make sense? I don't know if I fully understand everything, but the ride is so good that like, and so well thought out while you're watching it to like,
sure,
the emotions that you go through make it all kind of work and satisfying in the moment. So like, I appreciate that about this movie. Like, even though I've seen it probably 6-7 times, like watching it this last time, I was like on the ride enough to be like, to just enjoy it. And then later on I was like, oh yeah, there was that thing I was going to try to pay attention to see if it made sense. And I forgot because I was enjoying it so much.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, cool. 10-year anniversary.
Yeah, time flies.
Crazy. Yes, it does. Except right now. Things I did like 4 months ago seem like a year and a half ago.
Yep. Okay, so I think that's all we've got as far as news on the march, but I think we actually had some listener feedback from our first couple episodes of the Apu Trilogy. Am I right?
You are right. And I can go over that kind of briefly. I don't want to read out all of the feedback because it was kind of long. But basically what it was a listener via Instagram reached out to us to give us some insight to the perspective of the things going on in India at the time and sort of the politics and cultural things that some of them still are going on in India. So I think this person is from Bangladesh. I think it said at some point, or maybe I'm misremembering that, but they are from India, very familiar. But their name is Shubhankar Naman. And I'm sorry in advance if I'm pronouncing that wrong. I looked it up. I tried to do some research and do my best. So, apologies if I did it wrong. But to go over, they were kind of just filling out some questions that we had in our episode on Pather Benchali. And we questioned a lot about the father and where the father was. And he was saying that the father is a Brahmin. And the only job he can do or is qualified to do is be a priest. And because of the caste system in India, he basically has to work and he has no idea how much he's going to be paid or when it will be paid. So all of this stuff of him, them struggling with money and like, when are you going to get paid is not like, I think we were maybe a little judgmental on the father. Mm-hmm. Of him being kind of gone and where is he and what is he doing and not taking care of the family.
Yeah.
And, but it's very much a product of like, of the caste system. And like, you're kind of put into this class and this is what you can do. And this is what you can't do. And you're very limited in terms of your ability to go work and make a living and earn money.
Yeah. Which adds a whole nother kind of layer of tragedy on this tale.
Yeah. It's maybe a little more helpless the family is. You know what I mean? Like, there's not much they could do. Whereas like watching it as an American, you're like, come on, man, go work and go do
stop
some
trying
stuff.
to be a writer.
Yeah, stop hanging out with these people, these priests, and like smoking, whatever. Go make some money,
Yeah, go literally just do anything to improve your house.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing too is that the wife was very much responsible. I think we were like also judgmental on the dad for like making the wife fill his like pipe with coals and do some other stuff for him when he was perfectly capable. But that is very much a cultural thing, that is her job. And so it's very, very normal. It's not like a mistreatment of her. Sure.
I mean, but that's true. And I'm grateful for the insight, obviously. Sure. But I would obviously say, I think that like that would be common in America as well at this time period, right? Like the idea of like a woman waiting on the man, cooking dinner, filling his pipe, bringing in his slippers, filling up his drink. So that's something I feel like that just kind of highlights how similar cultures are kind of all over in a certain sense, which is that, maybe marriages a few decades ago all over were a little bit more patriarchal than they are now. Hopefully. I don't know. Maybe not.
Yeah. And the other thing that he adds in is in Aparajito, the family moves to the city so that he can work in a place that has more steady income as a priest. And that's why they're in the city for that one. And you and I, Mike, we talked a lot about that sort of upstairs neighbor who, when the father's sick, he tries to come into the room with the mother and she freaks out.
Yeah.
So he says, in Indian culture, a man doesn't enter someone's house if the man of the house is not present. And in Aparajito, he was not being kind to the family. And he knew that with the father on his deathbed, by showing kindness and coming in, he can get closer to the mother. And eventually it sounds like he could have forced her to be his mistress at some point.
So we were right to read that as like a really creepy, menacing scene.
Yeah. Yeah. Which seemed out of place, but I think that, if you know the culture, it is menacing.
Well, I think even if you don't know the culture, like we don't, we were able to pick up on her fear and her anxiety of it. And we came up with something pretty close to that when we dissected it. So, but it's nice to have clarification. So I'm so grateful for all of this like feedback.
Yeah, well, that is one of the great things about these movies is that some of these things you do kind of pick up on, even if you don't fully understand them. It's awesome to fully understand them, but to Satyajit Ray's credit, that comes across in the movie, even if it is sort of like seemingly out of place or seemingly sudden.
Yeah, 100% agree. And this feedback was really great. This is probably my favorite bit of like interactive feedback we've gotten.
Yeah, and he definitely sent some more on Apur Sansar, but we will talk about that when we review it.
In general, one of the things I love about watching movies is finding out new things about other cultures and stuff like this. This is even better. This is like taking it to a new level, is having somebody from that country write in and tell us about it. So it's like, it's a whole nother level, and I love it. I enjoy it so much.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great. I thanked him endlessly, maybe not endlessly, but several times during our exchange on Instagram, but I will thank him again. So thank you so much, Shubhankar. That feedback is awesome.
Yes, very much so.
Okay, and I guess with that, it's time to go ahead and move into our review of Apur Sansar. Are we ready?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay, so as always with our Criterion films, they are older films. They have typically been out for a while, so we will not be doing our usual spoiler-free general review section. We are going to jump straight into talking about the movie, spoilers and all. So this is your spoiler warning. If you have not seen Apur Sansar, then pause this podcast, go watch the film, go watch the whole Apu Trilogy if you haven't seen that, and then come back and finish listening to it.
All right. Apur Sansar, directed by Satyajit Ray, starring Soumitra Chatterjee, Sharmila Tagore, and Alok Chakravarti.
Beautiful.
I apologize. I know those weren't pronounced correctly, but hey, I'm doing the best I can here.
It's like music.
Yeah. The IMDb synopsis says, the final installment in Satyajit Ray's Apu Trilogy follows Apu's life as an orphaned adult aspiring to be a writer.
Those are facts.
Yep, that's what it's about.
A very non-emotional appeal to the viewer to try to get them to watch this movie if they're trying to see what this movie's about.
Okay, well, Justin, you were gone last week, so I vote you kick us off because you have also seen this movie twice.
I'll tell you what. I'll go first since this will be my wedding gift to Justin. Since I wasn't here for the middle one, I'll go ahead and I'll kind of if this is okay with you guys, but I'll speak a little bit about the second one and then go into my thoughts on the third one, and we can go from there. Is that cool?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I want to know what you thought about Aparajito briefly.
Well, briefly is I loved it. I liked it a lot. I actually just got finished listening to you guys' podcast on it and the conversation. Good job to both of you. I thought it was really great. Mike kind of really hit the nail on the head with the Tokyo story connection. I really thought of that while I was watching it, that guilt and moving on in your life and leaving people behind, even though you may not want to, like those opportunities to go see that person and being busy with your own things. I really liked how both the first two movies are framed because the first one's really about the sister and then the second one's kind of a lot about his mother. And going into the third one, I was wondering, what woman the third one would be about. Yeah, so I love the second one. And the whole trilogy, in fact, is really great. I like the third one quite a bit too. If it may not be up there with the first two, but that's like picking nits and, I thought the cinematography, just like the first two are really great. I like the new actor that's playing Apu. He does a really great job, and I like how we kind of get to see him age and change throughout this film. There are stunning shots in this film that this whole trilogy is just full of these like memorable moments of real people, or what feel to me like real people in India at the time. There are the actors, and then like the extras feel like real people, and it's really fascinating and adds an element to an element of texture that makes this movie feel more real and more tangible than like when you get like fancy actors that extras that just they look like extras, as opposed to look like real people. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I am a little curious about. I was a little disappointed, like having the mother and the daughter being, or not daughter, the mother and the sister being so strong in the first two films, or such a strong presence, I should say. And then the woman in this one isn't. Her presence is really felt, but she's not in it for very long. And I was expecting a little bit more, but I do feel like that presence is like she has a lasting impact, even if she's not in the film as long as like the mother and the sister. But yeah, I really love this film, and was actually, the Barnes & Noble sale was going on, and I recently looked it up to see how much it would be to get the trilogy, because this is something I would love to have on my shelf. So yeah, I can't wait to dive into it more. Justin, what do you think?
Well, I'm pretty much right there with you. I'm glad that you loved Aparajito too. That kind of makes all three of us loving that film. And I think this one is maybe a touch behind that one, as you said. Not much, because I think overall Apu's journey and watching him go through everything he goes through in these three films is really satisfying. But I think so much of this film is informed by the previous two films that there's some stuff in this film that I feel like we don't get a whole lot of new things from this film, as opposed to things that are kind of heavily felt because of things that have happened in the previous film, if that makes sense. And to your point, Chris, talking about the girl in this movie, his wife who he ends up marrying, I think one of the things that I would like in this movie is maybe if it were a little bit longer or spent a little bit more time on developing her and her relationship, so that, her death in this one, I'm not going to say that it wasn't impactful overall to the story, but like it doesn't have that same punch to me as the mother or the sister. And it feels a little bit like, well, whoever Apu gets close to or is close with needs to die, because that's what happens in these Apu Trilogy movies. And it kind of comes really quickly. And that's maybe my biggest complaint about this movie. Otherwise, I'm right there with Apu and loving him as a character and everything he's going through and feeling for him. And I love thinking about his life to this point and how that's turned him into who he is in this movie and causes him to react to things the way that he did. And I like putting that all together and thinking about his whole life. It's really satisfying. And I think it's a really good concluding chapter. Yeah, even if it is mostly leaning on being that concluding chapter as opposed to a great film on its own. And I'll leave it there and toss it over to Mike. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you guys kind of hit the nail on the head. I don't know that whenever it ended that I was as immediately enthusiastic as I was with Pather Panchali or Aparajito, but I still really, really enjoyed this movie. And I agree, maybe it's not quite as emotional as those other two, because those two were kind of like a punch in the gut to me whenever someone would die or something like that would happen. Whereas this one, it seems like the girl comes and goes very quickly. But I think where the interesting emotional dynamic comes in is what it does to Apu. Yeah. I don't necessarily care about the girl so much. We don't have time to really grow any kind of affection for her. Although I do feel bad for her. I think her life is quite tragic.
Yeah.
But mainly, I think where the emotion and the stakes come in is not feeling for the loss of that person, but it's feeling like Apu is really starting to feel the weight of these deaths. Like it's really apparent in this movie. And I think it's handled quite beautifully. Like Justin said, it's completely reliant on the first two, but if you are familiar with the first two, then it's quite fascinating and tragic and sad and compelling to sort of see how Apu grew up and what kind of decisions he's choosing to make, and then kind of ponder why he might choose to make those decisions. And I think there is where the interesting thing comes in, is I think this movie may not be quite as good on its surface level as the previous two. I think the previous two are made better by the arc of this film and where Apu ends up.
I think if you are to not separate these films out and to like judge this film on its own, and you look at this trilogy as a whole, it's all really great.
Yeah. It's almost the best trilogy of anything I've ever seen. Like I can't think of a better trilogy.
Yeah.
As far as quality and consistency through the entire thing.
Yeah. I think anything that kind of gives it a run for its money are some of those things that are kind of thematic trilogies as opposed to a genuine trilogy with like the same characters.
Like the Three Colors?
Yeah, like Three Colors or Lars von Trier's trilogy. I can't remember the name he gave the trilogy.
Well, he started a trilogy with Dogville and Manderley, but then never finished it.
Yeah, but that's the one with like Dancer in the Dark and Breaking the Waves and I think The Idiots.
Oh, yeah.
There's that one. I think Melancholia and Antichrist and is it Nymphomaniac are all a thematic trilogy. I could be wrong. Also, the Vengeance trilogy from Park Chan-wook.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The Vengeance trilogy, for sure. I feel that.
Yeah. But those are like the things I think of that come close to being as good, but they're not.
Well, I think of the Antoine Donnell, 400 Blows and The ones that came after that I can't remember right now. Bed and Board.
Stolen Kisses, Bed and Board. Love on the Run, I think, is one of them.
Yeah. It felt the most like that to me. Only I think the Apu trilogy is a little bit more eventful than the Antoine Doinel.
Yeah, it's more memorable. I think a little bit more complete, a little bit more satisfying, I guess.
Yeah, there you go.
Those are kind of like the adventures of, like, you could just go on forever doing the Antoine Doinel type of thing.
And every time every time you start a new one, you're like, who's he going to cheat on this time?
Yeah. While they're well made, I think this one is definitely more beginning, middle, and end, these three movies. I think there is an opening. If this was like an MCU movie, you could be like, oh, there's going to be another movie, and I can tell you what it's going to be about.
Well, here's the thing. They could have made a fourth one, like, and years later, and I would have loved that.
Yeah.
That's kind of all I want right now.
I would love if, like, we could go back in time and have him make, like, another trilogy of just this guy just going into, like, old age.
Yeah. Well, but then it's from, like, his son's point of view, right? So it's a son growing up, and it's the guy may be getting older, but it's the trilogy is from the son's point of view. That's what I would do.
Yeah, I think one more movie might have done it. And it's funny that you say that, because if you've listened to me talk on the Pather Benchali or the Parajito podcast, I mentioned that my initial viewing of these films were out of order. So this film was the one I watched second. And when it ended, I thought, oh, fantastic. I can't wait to watch this third movie where I get to see Apu as like an adult, and, like, you know, wherever we are in the father-son relationship that they're going to have. And I was so excited. And then I went and looked, and I was like, oh, the other one, this is the final one. And the next one was him in college. And I was very much looking forward to that story, and I would love it. I would love to, like, see it too.
So when you're watching this trilogy, are we supposed to just assume that Apu has terrible luck? Or the fact that all these people die, is it like a fate type situation? Or are we supposed to believe that, like, poverty in that particular, like, region is tough on people? You know, like, what do you think from that? I mean, is it just like the stars align and, like, Apu just has really bad luck and unfortunately he has to grow from that? Or is it something about class and hygiene? Or, you know, what do you think about the fact that Apu loses so many people through, you know, getting sick or natural causes like that?
I think that it is somewhat of a representation of the culture and the climate. I'm going to refer back to some of the notes that we got on Instagram about Apur Sansar, and I'm basically saying that this movie takes place after the independence of India kind of broke their economy. So Apu and, like, the middle class people were all struggling to get jobs. Like, the economy was tanking. So Apu, as an intellectual, doesn't necessarily, like, nobody has the room to, like, hire that, I think, is my understanding, right? Like, It's a bit more, you know, there's no excess to, like, entertain and hire intellectuals for work, because people are, you know, money's tight, basically.
Well, that is kind of like really bad luck then for him, because, you know, he starts off as this poor kid in this family. You know, his dad does his thing, and he's going to go better himself, in fact. And he does, and he goes and betters himself. But then in the end, the bettering doesn't mean anything. Yeah. Because they don't have room for him.
Yeah. But I think, like, to your point, Mike, the feeling that I get from all of these deaths is that they are, you know, while it's a lot to happen to him, I think it's relatively common in terms of his circumstances, right? Like, the circumstances that he is generally in are ones that would cause people to die. And maybe in this film, they all happen to be happening to Apu, and maybe it's a little exaggerated, perhaps, but I think it is the circumstances that are sort of on trial, in a sense, for that.
Right. Well, okay. Yeah. And at the beginning of the movie, he's kind of coming to terms with the idea that he's going to be more like his father than he probably thought he was going to be, right? He's a writer, an aspiring writer, trying to get work, can't quite do that, is kind of starting to settle for the idea that his life is going to be what it is. You know, because he's gone through that, and because his life is starting to shape up to be very similar to how it began, as far as class and living situation and all that stuff, you can completely understand his apprehension towards wanting to be a father. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
There was for a moment there that I was like, Apu, what are you doing? Like, go see the kid, but Apu has lost so much that I understand his defense mechanism of putting a wall up and being like, I can't open myself up to one more thing that could die,
Yeah.
Yeah. And kind of speaking on that, I wanted to, because you're completely right that like it's understandable as why he just like goes on a pilgrimage essentially, right? But the moment that he is told that his wife has died in childbirth was probably the best moment of the film, where he just punches the guy. That's his first reaction, is just to punch the guy. I love that moment. He just lays the guy out.
Yeah. And that's one of those things where the weight of the previous two films really makes that understandable, because
Yeah.
I think my knee-jerk reaction was like, you didn't really know her and you just kind of got married, and I understand that she is pregnant with your kid and she's your wife, and that's probably like,
They were
it
happy.
is tragic.
Yeah, I feel like that's the happiest we've seen Apu since like the first movie.
Yeah. And I'm not trying to downplay that at all, but like, I think once you factor in those other two movies, it's like that punch is like the culmination
Yeah,
of
it's just
all
like,
of
are you
these
freaking
deaths.
kidding me?
And
Yeah.
it makes a lot more sense emotionally. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I knew as soon as she got on the train, I was like, oh, they're going there again. And I understand like why and stuff, but it was just like, he's going to lose her too. And so like at that moment, I knew what was going to happen, but it still packed a punch, if you will, like at that point,
Yeah. And I think one of the other things that I was thinking about is that Apu kind of has this track record of in his life of when people die, they tend to leave and move on. Right? Like the sister dies, and the next time we see them, they're off in the city, and they've kind of like moved on from that, small village that they were in. And then the father dies, and him and the mother move to another village where they get work. Then, eventually she dies while he's in college, but he's in college, and like there's a lot of, at least as a viewer and what we see of Apu's story, there's not a lot of dealing with being in that place where someone died and dealing with that emotion and handling it as a character. And I'm wondering if that's intentional, where it's like they keep moving on. And so Apu having to go back and like find his son, and that, I think he makes comment of like, it's a reminder because he's here. That's why she's gone. Is there some sort of like struggle that he has to like deal with things because of the fact that they kind of like move around and move on so much like throughout his life after people die? Does that make sense?
Yeah, maybe. It makes you kind of, and like after his mom died, we don't really know exactly what happened to him for a few years,
Yeah, in the middle of that. I mean, listening to the podcast and you guys talk about it, there was something that you guys talked about was after the mom died, he actually seemed relieved to a certain extent.
Mm-hmm.
And at the beginning of this film, I think we continue that relief. Like I think he's like, I'm free. Like I don't necessarily want a job where I'm tied down. I just want to. I don't want these responsibilities because, like we've talked about, everything he's had has been taken away from him so far. And so he's just like, I'll just be free. I'm fine this way. Like I don't want anything else. So there's still that freedom that he wants at the beginning of this film. He gets married. And I think the son even ties into that too. At the end, he's like, if everything I have or want dies. And so like going to his son is like, it's not unreasonable for us to think that that's a curse, like he's just going to be taken away from me, so I think all those things kind of tie into it and is really well done.
Yeah. And also just from his father and his father struggling. And if you see that as the roundabout cause of the sister's death and the mother's death and the father's death, he's struggling too. So maybe he also feels like, I can't take care of that kid. That kid's just gonna have a bad life like I did or whatever, because I'm like my father
was rich. Yeah.
And
I guess if he stays with him, then
maybe he's better off where he is, right?
Yeah. It could only benefit him to not be with me.
Yeah, which is totally understandable after everything.
Yeah. I also like how this film keeps up the theme of trains.
Yes, I have that as in my notes. That was the next thing I wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
So
The presence of the train tracks and the sound of the horn, you know, you can feel it throughout the movie for sure. And this idea of trains being like a thematic reoccurring element throughout the trilogy is, I think, really interesting.
Yeah, I like its different meanings too. You know, it is there as a train, and it kind of represents different things in every movie. We talked about this on the Parajito episode, you know, in Pater Panchali. It kind of represents, you know, technology and future and things that aren't in this village, and something like really cool to Apu. And then in Parajito, there's a lot of like the train represents like Apu not coming home and like loneliness and leaving and that sort of thing. And I think what I got the most out of the train in this film was this like representation of poverty, which is kind of totally different from what it represented in Pater Panchali. Because in this one, the loudness and volume and like interruption of the train to his apartment, like when his wife first comes to the apartment, and you know, we're kind of self-conscious of what is she going to think of how Apu lives, right? And that train is just so loud, and you can kind of see it as like this sign of, wow, this is a really crappy, like poverty-stricken place that he lives, because it is so close and so, you know, the train is so obnoxious.
Yeah, ever present.
Yeah.
And then doesn't the train like sound come up when he's learning that she's died?
Yep. He's like walking along the train tracks, and you can like hear the horn blaring in the background too.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like the horn, whistle, steam, and like chugging of the train is kind of like this surrogate sound for his emotions building up before he punches that guy, if I remember correctly.
Oh, yeah.
Which is interesting. And then, of course, he's strongly contemplates killing himself at the train tracks.
Yeah, the pig gets hit first or whatever.
Yeah. Did that get anybody? Like, were you like, oh, no?
I mean, as a representation of where he is emotionally, I didn't necessarily think that he was going to die yet. It
just seems like the film cut away to someone and you hear a scream, right? And it's not a very human scream.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's kind of what he was going for, is to like cut away and you hear like a, you know, this scream and people react. And is he trying to make us think?
One of my favorite scream cuts in all of like movies. It's not the best movie, but you remember The Lost World, Jurassic Park, the second one?
Yeah, somewhat.
Do you remember at the beginning of the movie whenever like the little girl goes and she's like playing, and then like the little dinosaurs come out and they all swarm her and they start attacking her, and then like the mom runs up and she's like, ah, and she screams, you know, and she like puts her hands to her mouth like Macaulay Culkin in Home Alone.
Yeah.
And as soon as she starts to scream, it literally cuts to like a shot of Jeff Goldblum in the subway and he's yawning.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So like you can hear her scream with like Jeff Goldblum yawning, and it's one of my favorite cuts. I think it's a great cut. I think it's the best part of the movie, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, that's fair.
Do you guys remember what I'm talking about at all?
Yeah, no, I totally do now that you bring it up. It's really cool.
It's a great cut.
How does this compare?
Not as good, but pretty good.
If someone had been yawning,
it would have been
in
better.
This shot.
Yeah, much better.
Yeah, fair enough. I don't have too much more on this film. The one other thing I do want to call out is a couple of shots that I think are like really kind of memorable and stick out. The one is
just before you do, I just want to say I think this trilogy is just beginning, middle, and end is so high quality, so well filmed, and considering that Satyajit Ray wasn't even that like experienced, right? Like the first two movies in the trilogy were his first two movies.
Yeah.
And they are better filmed than most movies.
Yeah, totally. I think I said this during Pater Panchali and probably a Parajito too, but I am so impressed overall with this trilogy compared to what I thought it was going to be, being one of the earlier breakout like Indian films, right?
Yeah.
I just expected it to be, have a lot of the hallmarks of like early filmmakers who are learning and didn't quite know what they were doing, and not to have like such high quality, but these are just impressive. start to finish.
Thematically, quality-wise, richness-wise, it's one of the best trilogies I've ever seen, and I stand by that. I can't think of many trilogies that are just as, from beginning, middle, and end, so high quality.
Yeah, agreed.
And I did want to talk about a couple of shots that stuck out to me that I just thought were really interesting.
Sorry, I interrupted you. I apologize.
It's okay. It's okay. You can interrupt me to gush about this all you want. But the shot of the wife when she's looking out the window, and we cut to like there's like the cloth with the hole in it through the window, and she's crying. That shot is just like that's one of the emotional gut punches to me.
All timer. It's one of the best shots.
Yeah. That's the big one that sticks out to me. The other one that I really like, just in terms of revealing something and I guess surprising me within a shot and conveying like I don't know, it made me happy. But when Apu's leaving right at the end of the movie and he's walking away from the kid after the kid doesn't want anything to do with him, and there's that shot where like Apu stops and you just see in the background, like way off in the background, the little kid like come around the corner and stand there and like stop too, I think is what happens. But somehow it kind of like reveals like, oh, this kid's way back there without actually like saying anything. And I like that we like kind of see him before Apu does. It's this really satisfying moment that I guess starts this turn towards this, if you want to call it a happy ending to this trilogy.
I wouldn't call it happy. I would call it hopeful.
Yeah. Yeah. Hopeful is a good word for it. But I love being hit with that emotion when we see the kid in the background following him. Like you kind of know, okay, this is where the movie's going and this is how it's going to end. And
yeah, for a minute, I honestly thought, I was like, you know what? Apu's seen so much stuff that I wouldn't be surprised if like the end of this movie is him being like, you're on your own, kid. Like, I didn't know. For a minute there, I was genuinely like, man, Apu turned into a real piece of crap. So
yeah,
I was happy at the end.
Yeah, I was feeling bad for him then. I think, he finally tries, he's like, I'm going to go visit him and get my son and do what I should do as a father or what I feel I should do. And to then be rejected, I felt bad for him then.
Yeah, the kid throws like a rock at him when he first shows up, and you're just like, oh, wow.
Kid's mad, man. He's been gone.
Harsh, yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking he's like 5 years old. He doesn't know what's up or down yet. Like he doesn't know that his dad's been gone.
He knows that he hasn't had any affection. Like he's not dumb. Like he knows that he's lived in an orphanage without any like parents. Like that hasn't escaped him.
Mm-hmm.
So that was his grandparents. It wasn't an orphanage.
Well, sure. Like okay. Yeah. Well, yeah, but it's not like he hasn't like that man wasn't very affectionate. He beats him with a stick.
Yeah, that's true. I like the moment where the kid was like, do dads have pigtails?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that kid is really good, too.
Yeah.
Like, there's so much in his performance.
So was the girl who played the wife.
Yeah.
The casting of this whole trilogy is remarkable, that he got the people that he did, and they worked out so very well.
Well, again, it's a mix of actors, like professional actors, and then non-professional actors. And I think it kind of helps the tone of the entire trilogy be consistent.
Yeah. And apparently this was like the wife's first role, and then she went on to do a whole bunch of other stuff after this.
Yeah. I think the main Apu actor and Aparna is the character's name, the wife's name. They went on to feature in a lot of Satyajit Ray's movies.
Yeah.
But yeah, she's really good. Like, I feel like she has like 5 words in this whole film that she says.
When she's cooking and like getting ready and stuff, like she has this like happiness or charm to her that she's like, I don't know. It felt like a newlywed thing, like it's all new still.
Yeah.
But like they felt happy, like, and it was just so great. And she like playfully like smacked him on the butt when, like they woke up in the morning or whatever. It was, it was pretty great.
Yeah. Maybe, I think I criticized the film for maybe not developing her enough, but there is a lot that she's doing without saying anything and portraying those things. So maybe it is okay.
Yeah. I mean, for me, my expectations were, what female is this movie going to be centered on? Like the first two. And it didn't feel like we had that third female. And that's okay. And
I think that would have been a mistake. I think focusing the third movie on Apu and featuring a female But the movie's not about the female, it's about Apu, right? Like the other ones, I would say they were about Apu tangentially, and it ended up being more about like what the person that we spent the most time with, the effect they had on Apu down the road. And I think the third movie is the culmination of that, in the sense that, yeah, okay, we see the wife and we might be expecting to spend the most screen time with her. But when she dies real quick, I don't look at that so much as a disservice to her, so much as I look at it as Apu, the person this trilogy is really about, is finally coming to the forefront. And it's about, this is like the last straw before he breaks.
Yeah.
This is the culmination of all the loss he's felt so far. He dared to hope again, and it was taken from him. So I think it only really works if you've seen the previous two. Otherwise, it seems like a very odd journey for the character.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Does anybody have anything else they want to talk about with the Apur Sansar before we wrap it up?
Well, I kind of want to talk about the marriage a little bit. Talk about pressure. Like, you go to a wedding just to enjoy yourself and have a good time, right? And someone backs out of it. And now, and I think actually our listener wrote in about this, but now, because that other, someone's backed out of it, because the wife was promised to somebody else, it looks like she's been rejected and is no longer valuable, essentially. So it's like this noble thing that he can do to marry her, but like, man, that's a surprise weekend for sure. Just and pressure filled.
The scene when he's like, "What did I tell my friends? I went to the wedding and came back with the bride," and like,
yeah,
he seems so smitten with himself.
Yeah. It is one of those real cultural differences where I think to us that idea seems insane to even ask Apu if he's willing to do it.
Yeah, grossly inappropriate.
Yeah, and it seems so horrible to put him in that position, and to even consider it, you're like, you don't even know this person. But culturally, it's definitely like putting him in a position of like you said, Chris, and like we got on Instagram, like it's a noble act. It's really saving her from
dishonor,
a ruined life, basically, after this point.
I mean, from my understanding, most marriages are made without really knowing the other person. So as far as that goes, like that's a very cultural thing for them. Like that happens on a regular basis.
Yeah, and we see that in Pather Panchali too, because the sister's friend is, getting prepared to marry somebody as a child. It's already arranged, and I believe that she was going to suffer the same fate at some point too.
Yeah, and I think the actress herself was only like 14.
Yeah, she was not very old. I think that they put an ad in the paper for like 15 to 17 or 14 to 17. So the actress is not very old in this. One of the things that I love about this being a trilogy is during the wedding, I remembered the sister like being so smitten with the other girl getting married. I was like that was just kind of a poignant thing to me, because the sister never got to get married. And so it was like having your own memories of what had happened, and so like does that make sense? Like you're like, oh, the sister never even got this chance. And it was really,
like we as the audience
nice.
member, like look back and we're like, oh yeah, I remember the sister was looking forward to her wedding.
Yeah.
Bummer.
And it kind of calls back, and it's not even in there. And I think that's these movies being so quiet and kind of, what is the word you used it? Methodically paced or methodically deliberately paced gives you this time to like sink into it and have your own thoughts as you're watching it, and like kind of be enveloped in this world. And it really does you a favor by like letting you just sink into this world, and I love it.
Totally agree.
And that's all I have.
Yeah, I think I've pretty much expired all my thoughts on this film.
Well, cool. And we all recommend this whole trilogy. It sounds like I think we're all over the moon about it.
Yeah,
for sure.
I feel like it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I enjoyed Pather Panchali, I enjoyed Aparijito, but thinking of them as the entire trilogy from beginning to end, that's really where like the enthusiasm comes from. Because I feel like now that I go back, even though I loved Pather Panchali when I first watched it, if I went back and only got to watch Pather Panchali the next time I watched this, I would feel like the story was incomplete. I would need the whole thing for it to really like register in my brain. Like it's like one piece of work. I don't even think of it as 3 films anymore. It's just kind of this one piece of work that they all complement one another and make one another better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, we definitely spaced out how we watched these. You know, I know, Justin, you'd seen it before and watched it out of order, but you had kind of watched them a little bit more rapidly, I think.
Yeah.
But would you suggest that somebody watch it like kind of like we did? Because like I think we did it was like every 2 weeks, or I think we watched one of them and then did the podcast on them. Or I actually think I would recommend somebody doing it like that as opposed to binging all 3 of them in one afternoon.
Yeah, I think you might lose something in binging it so close together, at least in the sense that my appreciation for the films on this second viewing is enhanced by taking the time between to meditate on them, and not just that, but discuss the film with someone else and to read about the film and have those discussions like on your mind whenever you go into the second one. Like it enhances the next movie and then the next movie. I think that time in between, to if you have someone to discuss it with, or you can watch it with someone and really, dwell on the movie, I think it enhances and makes the other movies more satisfying.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, Mike?
Well, I think you need to give it at least a day in between films. I think reflection only helps. You can binge it, but it's just so rich that I don't know that you would get much more of a benefit from it.
Yeah.
And I would also say that, this sounds pretty like self-promotional, but like listen to reviews, listen to discussions about these movies in between watching them.
Yeah.
If not our show, then someone else's. YouTube a review or something. Sit there and really reflect on what each movie means before moving to the next one.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think, if you binge them, you'll forget little details, and then by the time the third movie rolls around, it just won't be as rich of a tapestry of themes and ideas to pull from. This movie gets so much better once you are familiar with the first 2 films, especially, the last half of it, given Apu's conflict in himself, So I think all of that stuff is really necessary to really appreciate Apu. But I think spacing it out, it can only benefit the experience.
Yeah, and it's one of those things, there's a time jump between films. Between each film, we pass like a certain number of years, and, binging sometimes destroys that a little bit, right? Like, I'll use an example of I've only seen the first season of Game of Thrones, and I feel like that is a show I wish I would have watched week to week as opposed to binging it, because there was a certain point in season 1 where I realized that almost a year had passed in the show, and I thought we had passed 2 weeks worth of time.
Yeah.
And it sort of diminished, I think, some of the grand epicness of the story. And I think, like you said, Mike, a day, 2 days, however much time, I wouldn't recommend watching them back to back for that reason.
Yeah. I'm a binger. I like binging things, but not in this situation.
Yeah, I like binging when the circumstances call for it. Like if it's trash TV, like for example, something like Ozark on Netflix, where I know there's not much deeper to think about.
Mm-hmm.
I'll binge it because it makes the show better. But if it's a really well-made show and there's a lot that, on the table, like Sopranos or Mad Men, or anything of really great quality, I think the slower you take it, the better it's going to go down.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Cool. Well, should we move on to doing our next Criterion poll and making our choices?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. It's been so long.
I know it's been a while because we moved on to doing the whole Apu trilogy. So
we're going to do the Before trilogy next, right?
Right. And then the Katsi trilogy. But so for those unfamiliar, we pick a theme, usually based on current events or current films and things that are going on. And we don't really have a lot of current films and things going on, so we're keeping it simple. This poll's theme is going to be summer, which is appropriate for the time of the year.
It sure is.
Because it's summer, you see.
Yes, it is hot.
Okay, who wants to get us started on picking their film for the theme of summer? I'll do it.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I was going to... That silence was paining me. Okay, So I've got 2 films, but since I'm going first, I guess I can just pick whichever one I want.
Yes, you can.
Okay. So I am choosing a film from one of my favorite directors, Alfonso Cuarón.
Ooh.
And that is Itu Mama Tambien.
Nice.
Yes.
Yeah. I haven't seen that in so long.
Which means
I'd like
to
see it
throw
again.
Mama from the Tambien. Just kidding.
Yes,
That's
it
an
does.
Office joke from some advertisement from like season 3 of The Office or something like
Yeah.
that. But
Good
anyways,
choice. This is on my short list of potential ones I was going to choose, so I'm glad that it's on here too, so I don't have to choose it now.
yeah, I've only seen it one time. I saw it probably when I was like 18 years old and I first started working at Blockbuster. This was one of the first like foreign films that I really got into, and I thought it was beautiful.
I love this movie so much, so I've seen it a couple of times and can't wait to watch it a third, so I hope it wins. I don't know what I'm going to pick. I don't know what Chris is going to pick, but I kind of hope this one wins.
Yeah, me too. And I also don't know what you guys are going to pick. So without further ado, Chris.
Yeah, so I picked a movie I haven't seen. I think we've only done one of this director's movies before that I can remember. And this is way back at the very beginning of the podcast. I wasn't even on the podcast for the episode. But it's a sex comedy, from my understanding. And it's Smiles of a Summer Night by Ingmar Bergman. I feel like that fits our criteria. And sex comedies. Itu Mama Tambien is basically a sex comedy to a certain extent. So we're going the theme.
Sex dramedy.
Summer and sex. Yeah. So that's my pick. Justin.
Yeah, well,
Better have sex in it.
yeah. I was going to say, keeping with the theme of sex and sexy movies, I'm going to go with Monsieur Hulot's Holiday.
The sexiest of all the summer movies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hulo is so sexy.
Yeah, the hat, the pipe. Jacques Tati is a sex symbol, no doubt. But yeah, this is one of my favorite films. It's one I really wanted to put in my top 10 when we did our top 10 favorite films each episodes of about a month or so ago. It didn't quite make the cut, but it was in my honorable mentions. I think this movie is super funny. I love Jacques Tati and this whole like almost silent style of comedy. It's kind of a precursor to the Mr. Bean type character who's a little mumbling and bumbling. And I really like this movie a lot.
Yeah, I just went through Tati's all of his movies and loved basically everything he did. So I would be thrilled to do this again.
Yeah, I love Hulot's Holiday. Is it Mon Oncle?
Yep. And it's Hulo.
Yeah,
not
Hulo. Okay, my least favorite I think was Playtime, but I would love to watch that again.
Yeah, that's one I want to revisit because I kind of had the same reaction. And I think it's because I came from Hulot's Holiday to Playtime, which is
He's doing something else in
big
Playtime.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
go ahead.
he's not in it as much in Playtime. Like, that was one thing I missed about Playtime. I liked it, and he's doing these crazy set pieces and stuff, but he's just not in it. And I kind of missed him being in it.
Yeah.
But yes, go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No. When you watch his films in order, you see the progression of how he gets to what Playtime is doing, but it's very different from Hulot's Holiday. Hulot's Holiday is a lot of comedy, a lot of fun. It's very pleasant, and there's not a lot of story to it. It's just kind of a lot of incidents and happenings on people's summer vacation. And it's definitely one of those films that every time I go back and watch it, it's like going back to this vacation spot every year and seeing all of the like locals and the people that you recognize who were vacationing there last year. It's like going on vacation with all these people again. And it's one of the things I really love about it. So always happy to revisit this one.
Awesome.
For sure.
Cool.
Yeah. So Mike, you said you had 2. I'm just curious, what is the movie that you didn't pick?
Oh man, hang on. I had it up on my phone. Hang on. Give me a moment and I'll tell you.
Okay.
Yes. It was going to be Easy Rider.
Oh yeah.
Because I
That's
have the
kind of the one I
BBS
was
box
guessing
set.
you would pick.
And I haven't seen Easy Rider since I first got it on Blu-ray.
Yeah. That's a good one. In the same vein, I had Dazed and Confused on my short list.
Ooh, that would have been a really good one.
Yeah. So yeah, that would have been a good one, going into summer. But I watched that pretty recently, so it kind of helped me not choose that one. And then I think also, Chris, you chose a Bergman film, so I had Summer with Monica, which is another Bergman film.
It's a good movie.
Okay, yeah.
But I have not seen that one, so I was going to pick it, but I didn't want 2 Bergman films on here.
What a sexy Criterion cover.
we really missed out on Ozu because Ozu, like every other movie, has some season in it. I feel like we could have
early summer. I think we could have gone.
Yeah, early summer,
late summer. I'm sure is one. No, I thought late spring. I think is that one. The other one I had was a Tree of Life, although that's been on our poll a few times and never quite wins, so I didn't go with that one.
Y Tu Mamá También wins this one. That's my prediction.
Yeah, I think you're spot on.
I hope you're spot on.
Yeah.
I would watch any of these.
Me too.
I would too, because I have to. Just kidding. I would watch any of them anyway. So guys, real quick before we go, I've been playing a game that just came out on PS4 called Ghost of Tsushima.
Oh yeah, I've heard of this.
It's so good. There's a mode called Kurosawa mode where you can actually put it in black and white, and actually like is a mode that's like designed to make like everything in the game still visible. You could like actually play the game in black and white, but like they even have like film scratches and whatnot, and it all takes place in like feudal Japan where you're like a samurai and you can wear different samurai outfits and get different kinds of swords and stances for your combat and stuff. And I just want to say real quick sidebar, anyone who's listening to this show who loves like Kurosawa movies and samurai movies and also happens to be even a casual video gamer, look into Ghost of Tsushima because it is so freaking cool. Mike from the Cinemust podcast told me about it a couple weeks ago, and then I looked it up and pre-ordered it right away because it's just so cool, especially for samurai movie nerds. And
maybe it'll turn a lot of people on to samurai movies.
Yeah, that's my big hope, is like that I hope some like 14, 13-year-old nerd plays Ghost of Tsushima and then wants to go watch Seven Samurai or Yojimbo or something like that.
Makes sense.
But the fact they call the black and white mode Kurosawa mode, and it actually has like film scratches and like they go through the effort to make it look like one, like if you popped in a Blu-ray of Yojimbo, it looks very as close to that as it could be, and just as a movie nerd, I really appreciate that. It's really cool.
Yeah, I remember I read somewhere they had to strike a deal with the Kurosawa estate. They had to in order to put his name in there, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, well, it's rad. Whatever they did, it's really, really cool.
Well, cool. Well, thanks for the video game recommendation.
Yeah, you're welcome. I just wanted to tack that on to the end of the show real quick.
Yeah. With that, I suppose we are done with this episode, huh?
Yeah. I determined it was the end of the show, so I decided to start talking about that.
Fair enough. Cool. Well, thank you so much, listener, for listening. And then, of course, as always, thank you, Jake Wagner Russell, for doing our intro and outro music. If you want to hear more of his music, you can do so at soundcloud.com/bopscotch.
All right. Stay tuned to this feed, this channel. Next episode we're going to put out is First Cow, which I have been looking forward to for a few months now, and I'm quite excited that it's here.
Yeah, there's some jokes that I'm really looking forward to milking next week.
I don't get it.
Well, I'll explain.
You'll have to see the movie.
Okay.
Yeah. We don't want to spoil what cows do.
Oh, okay. Makes sense.
Cool. Well, if you have any questions or topics you want us to discuss on First Cow, or if you want to go vote in our poll to choose our next Criterion film, which, just to recap, because we didn't earlier, your choices are Y Tu Mamá También, Monsieur Hero's Holiday, and Smiles of a Summer Night. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Casual Cinecast. You can vote on our Twitter account. You can also send your questions to casualcinemedia@gmail.com.
Thanks so much for listening, guys, and we will see you next time. Meanwhile, be safe.
Yep, what he said.
See you next time.